Welcome back now for the news in detail. We start from Iran, which says any country that attacks it will be turned into the main battlefield of the ensuing war.
Revolutionary Guards Commander Major General Hussein Salami warned any conflict would not remain limited. Addressing the media in Tehran, Salami said Iran would never allow any war to encroach upon its territory. He expressed hope that Washington would not make a strategic mistake. Earlier, the US announced it will beef up its forces in Saudi Arabia in the wake of attacks on the kingdom's oil infrastructure. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper told reporters in Washington the fresh deployment will be defensive in nature. Esper says the troops are being sent at Saudi Arabia's request. He says the US will speed up delivery of military equipment to Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
We're calling on many other countries who would also have these capabilities to do two things. First of all, stand up and condemn these attacks. And secondly, look to also contribute defensive capabilities.
Earlier, President Trump said a military strike against Iran is always a possibility.
Right, to talk more about this, we have with us online Abdul Aziz Ghashiyan from Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much, Abdul Aziz, for being with us on Indus News. So Abdul Aziz, Iran says any country that attacks it will be turned into the main battlefield of the ensuing war. And the Revolutionary Guard statement came after the US announced to send its troops to Saudi Arabia. So Abdul Aziz, do you see any armed conflict in the near future?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. I think the armed conflict that I foresee will be a very limited one, if there will be one. I do not foresee, and I do not think that there will be an armed conflict of a scale of the magnitude of an Iraqi invasion or something like Desert Storm, where conventional forces will have to be mobilized. I do foresee that there will be some kind of tethering and testing each other's limitations. So if there will be any kind of conflict, it will be a very low-scale military conflict, and it will be a very limited one.
Right, Abdul Aziz. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper has also said the deployment in Saudi Arabia will be defensive in nature. I repeat, defensive in nature. So, Abdul Aziz, does this mean US troops will only retaliate and not attack Iran?
You see, this is very interesting because I think what has been taking place in the past week and the diplomacy and the communication that's been taking place between Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the United States in the past week has been very much of a coordinative kind of effort, an effort that tried to highlight potential responses in the future. Now, I do think, due to the amount of rhetoric being surrounded in the region about the Saudi lack of military response, or the lack of Saudi military response, that there is this eagerness to respond to such a drone strike, if it happens, with force, in order to demonstrate the capacity of the military force by Saudi Arabia or UAE. But in order to have these American forces deployed in Saudi Arabia for an offensive measure was not something that was going to happen. I think even though in this defensive deployment, it is still part of this kind of posture that the United States and Saudi Arabia and the UAE are trying to pose in order to try to deter and raise the cost of such limited warfare between Saudi Arabia, UAE, or in general the Gulf, and Iran.
Right, thank you very much, Abdul Aziz, for just on Indus News. We hope to see peace in the Middle East. Now, moving on, Yemen's Houthi rebels say they plan to halt attacks on Saudi Arabia. Leading Houthi official Mahdi al-Mashad says the gesture is meant to bring about peace talks with the Saudis. Al-Mashad expressed hope the Saudis will respond positively to the signal. He says Houthis will stop aiming missile and drone attacks at the kingdom. He also warned continuing the war can lead to dangerous developments. Al-Mashad called for Yemen's warring parties to hold negotiations for a national reconciliation. Moving on, US President Donald Trump is threatening to release ISIS prisoners at European borders if France, Germany and other countries don't take back their captured nationals. Speaking to reporters at the Oval Office, Trump said the United States can't spend billions of dollars housing prisoners at the Guantanamo Bay. Thousands of captured ISIS fighters are being held in camps in Syria. Most of EU countries have refused to take back prisoners after US declared victory against ISIS militants in March. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has left for the United States to attend 74th United Nations General Assembly session. Pakistan's permanent ambassador to United Nations Maliha Lodhi said PM Khan will raise the Kashmir issue at the session on September 27th. In a statement, Foreign Office said the Premier will hold bilateral meetings with his counterparts of several countries. The statement said Prime Minister Khan will also attend United Nations summits on climate change, sustainable development and health coverage. PM Khan will meet US President Donald Trump on Monday. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Pakistan stands by the Kashmiris in their freedom struggle from India. Talking to Indian Muslims in Medina, Qureshi said Pakistan will fight the Kashmir case at the United Nations General Assembly. A youngster from Kashmir told Qureshi that he is not being allowed to contact his family in occupied Kashmir. He said he does not know about the well-being of his loved ones since India imposed curfew on August 5th. The international community has repeatedly asked New Delhi to end the lockdown under UN resolutions, which enters 48th day in the occupied valley. India's opposition leader Rahul Gandhi says Prime Minister Narendra Modi's rally in Houston will be the world's most expensive event. However, the International Humanitarian Foundation of Houston will also stage a protest against the Modi government's illegal actions in occupied Kashmir. Modi is scheduled to address a public gathering in Houston during his visit to the U.S. In a tweet, Gandhi said, "No event can hide the economic mess that Modi has created." A day earlier, the Modi government announced big relief to companies by slashing corporate tax rates. India's GDP growth has slipped to a 6-year low in the last fiscal quarter. Due to continuous economic recession, thousands of workers have been laid off from jobs since April. Kashmiri and Sikh activists will hold anti-India protests in Houston tomorrow during Prime Minister Modi's visit. The activists have already conducted a rehearsal, decorating vehicles with flags and protest signs. Meanwhile, the Indian troops brutally beat civilians in Kupwara during a cordon and search operation yesterday. The Kashmiri media reports that Indian forces ransacked houses, damaged property and harassed civilians. The former Chief Minister of occupied Kashmir, Mahbooba Mufti, has asked India to provide details of detentions since August 5th. In a letter to Indian government, she sought an answer within 3 days. Moving on, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani says he will introduce measures to prevent civilian casualties in the war against militants. He was addressing an election rally in Jalalabad a day after 30 civilians were killed in a US drone strike in Nangarhar province. Ghani said his government took steps to stop night raids and attacks targeting innocent people. But a member of the Nangarhar Provincial Council said Ghani's condemnation of the attack is not enough. He said the president should bring perpetrators of civilians killings to justice. According to the United Nations, over 3,500 civilians have been killed or wounded in the first half of this year. In Afghanistan, security has been beefed up for upcoming general elections. Over 500 polling stations have already been excluded because of security reasons. More in this report.
Hundreds of workers check and recheck biometric fingerprint readers in a dusty Kabul suburb. The young employees at the Independent Election Commission are rushing through final technical preparations for the vote set for September the 28th. The Taliban have openly threatened to disrupt the polls. The stakes for the IEC are high, with the question of turnout in Afghanistan's fourth presidential election. The fall of the Taliban is crucial to whether the elections are seen as fair and transparent.
There are many differences between this presidential election and the last presidential election because we have worked on rules and regulations, procedures and mechanisms to prevent fraud in the upcoming elections.
Turnout in previous polls was historically low. The United Nations estimated it at around 32% for 2009 elections, while no credible figure was available for the 2014 vote.
Sensitive and non-sensitive materials of the IEC have been transferred to all provinces by the Afghan security and defense forces, and the Afghan security and defense forces have not encountered any security threats during the transfer.
The IEC's huge complex is itself a tightly guarded fortress with 4 checkpoints and as many barriers to cross before visitors can access it.
Thousands of anti- and pro-democracy protesters rally in Hong Kong after the formers pulled down some of their Lennon Wall messages. The protesters converged on the government offices in the town of Chue Mu in the west of the New Territories. Police fired tear gas after the protesters hurled petrol bombs towards the security officials. Police say they have arrested several demonstrators. Meanwhile, in Egypt, thousands of pro-democracy protesters have taken to the streets of the capital city, Cairo. Demonstrators are demanding President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's resignation of alleged corruption charges. A huge crowd joined the demonstrators around Tahrir Square in Cairo, chanting anti-Sisi slogans. Riot police fired tear gas to disperse protesters, arresting dozens. The demonstrations came after a self-exiled Egyptian businessman, Muhammad Ali, accused the president of corruption, demanding his overthrow. El-Sisi has dismissed the allegations, calling them lies. Such demonstrations are rare in Egypt after unauthorized protests were effectively banned in 2013. In Libya, a US airstrike kills 8 suspected ISIS militants in southern Mourzouk district. A US African command says it conducted the raid in coordination with the Libyan government. It said ISIS will not be allowed to benefit from the conflict in the country. ISIS militants lost their stronghold in Libya's central town of Sirte in December 2016. Since then, the group has retreated to the country's south. In Palestine, Israeli forces have wounded 74 Palestinians during weekly protests at the Gaza border. Medics say 48 demonstrators have been shot with live rounds. Palestinian officials say Israeli troops also fired tear gas and rubber bullets at the demonstrators. Dozens of protesters fell ill after inhaling tear gas. Israeli forces have killed over 300 Palestinians and wounded about 18,000 others since weekly protests began in March 2018. 7 top Boko Haram commanders have been killed by Nigerian army in a fierce battle around the Lake Chad region. Military officials said operations was conducted by the Nigerian and other regional troops. The spokesman said militants were fleeing to the north and central Africa after operation in northeast. In the United States, 4 people have been killed in the western state of Utah after a bus carrying Chinese tourists crashed near the national park. Officials said the vehicle was near Bryce Canyon National Park when it veered off-road and hit a guardrail. Of the 30 people on board, 26 passengers have been taken to hospital with injuries ranging from minor to life-threatening. Authorities are investigating the cause of the crash. In Spain, thousands of protesters have taken to the streets of Madrid and other cities against domestic violence. Demonstrators demanded tougher actions against partner violence. The spring protests were called after a series of rape cases and rise in the number of women killed by their partners or ex-partners. According to Interior Ministry, over 40 women have been murdered in domestic violence attacks this year. Despite anger over such cases, far-right party VOX has called for domestic violence laws to be repealed. The party wants the laws to be replaced with legislation providing equal protection for men, women, children and the elderly. Skies, water and iconic buildings ablaze in Moscow for the International Circle of Light Festival. Dazzling fireworks wowed the audience during the opening ceremony. We have more details in this report.
Dancing lights sparkling on the water and twinkling colorful laser beams on Moscow buildings amazed the happy visitors. Muscovites braved cold weather to witness 3D graphic designs and pyrotechnics telling stories from different cultures. Men and women cheered as they filmed the remarkable fireworks on mobile phones. The festival attracted sightseeing lovers from around the globe.
I took flight from Chisinau at 7 in the morning, so I was in Moscow by midday, to be here at 6 to take the first row. I have been dreaming to see this festival for 3 years.
Lighting designers and audiovisual artists from various countries reinvented the Moscow architecture utilizing flame and laser.
I came here because it is the largest stage of the festival and because of how it all reflects in the water. The scenery doubles.
The 4-day-long festival will last till September the 24th.
After 2 days of trade talks in Washington, the United States has lifted punitive tariffs on over 400 Chinese products. Both Washington and Beijing say progress is made in the deputy-level dialogue. The 437 exempted Chinese products range from printed circuit boards to laminated wood flooring. During the talks, U.S. officials pressed China to substantially increase its purchases of American soybeans and other farm commodities. But Trump told reporters agricultural purchases are not enough to seal a trade deal.
We're looking for a complete deal. I'm not looking for a partial deal. China has been starting to buy our agricultural product, if you noticed, over the last week, and actually some very big purchases. But that's not what I'm looking for. We're looking for the big deal.
Now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, with the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.